I was so blessed to attend a Jenny Doan trunk show recently, and halfway through the show she started going into her routine where she starts to create these disappearing blocks. Well, the disappearing pinwheel blew my mind so much that I had to get right into my graph paper and start drafting my own creation. Let's get started. Look at this lovely quilt behind me. This is going to be such a fun block to create. Now check it out. Right down here you see the base unit of the disappearing pinwheel. It is much more complicated looking than it actually is to sew. I'm going to build you up step by step. Now in order to do it though, let's talk a little bit about our fabric choices here. I have both 10-inch square packs from Robert Kaufman. Now these are solid fabrics. There's a beautiful variety of color. This was actually one of those kits that when I saw all of these fabrics, I had to design a quilt to go with it because I fell in love with this. So I'm going to refer to these today as my solid fabrics, but they are actually not the neutral that you'll see in the background. The neutral I'm using is actually a white on white collection from Kaufman. And if you look kind of carefully, there's a different series of shades in there. I'm going to refer to these as our prints as I go through the video because they have a texture to them. Now, I specifically chose pre-cuts that had at least 2 of each fabric in there. So if you look at this block, we're going to build this exact block twice. So the 2 same solids with this 2 same prints together to create this. Mouthful, but I have a feeling you've got a good understanding of what we're going to do with our fabrics, right? So in order to get started, we are simply going to take 2 of our squares, right? It's going to be our print, and they're white on white, so make sure you really know which is the correct side. And the correct side is going to be buried underneath one of your solids. Make sure you know which side the correct side is on the solid, too. There'll be a quiz on that later. Now, once you have your 2 10 squares all matched up, you're going to simply sew around them with a 1/4 inch seam allowance like you see that I've already done here for you. Now, once all that stitching has been done, we're going to simply, and I'm on a Lazy Susan mat because this is going to help me be able to rotate with my cutting today. I've got one of the MSQC 13-inch rulers, which fits perfectly across there. I'll talk about the tape in a little bit. I'm going from the cross in the threads to the cross in the threads, and I'm going to cut once across here, and I am not going to move that fabric. I'm going to peel my ruler up so I don't move anything, and I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to drop that again, thread cross to thread cross, and I'm going to slice, and when that opens up, look what we have. That's the magic of creating these half square triangles, and I just think it's absolutely genius. Almost all of the sewing today, till we get to the fine sewing at the end, we're going to basically be doing pressing to the dark side. And the way to do that is grab onto your dark fabric, carry it over to your ironing station, and then just press that seam right over to the dark side. And when I'm building quilts like this, I usually build one block start to finish to make sure I actually know what I'm doing. Well, at least I think I know what I'm doing. But then after that, I go into assembly mode style. So I keep that one block on an orientation up on the wall that I can see as I'm working throughout the day. And then I just keep doing all of my pressing, all of my sewing of each step so that I can stay focused on where I am. And I was too busy talking. Guess what I just did? I pressed to the rebels. I pressed to the light side. So we're going back to the dark side, the empire. We'll get that one. And the reason that that's so important is it really helps my seams nest later on. Okay, so from here, we're going to build actually a pinwheel block. So what I learned to kind of do is look for these triangles. They're going to be the opposite fabrics touching like this. And when you're building your pinwheels, you can actually make left-sided pinwheels or right-sided pinwheels. So this is the point where I want to make sure you make them all the same. Okay, so as I'm laying that out, that doesn't look correct, but that certainly does, right? So the first steps here is I'm going to join seams. So what I'll do is I'll pull those over and I'll take it over to the machine and I'll run it through the machine like that. And of course I'll join those 2 center seams here as well. Once those are technically all done, we have this approach. And yes, I opened it up incorrectly on purpose for you because I want you to be very careful before we do our next series of seams, right? If you put it together like this, it's not a pinwheel anymore, ladies and gentlemen. So we need to make sure we put it together just like this. So after I have 2 squares joined, I'm going to make sure that I set this seam here, Remember when I was talking about those dark sides, all of that just nests perfectly in there. And then I've got this pinch and I'm gonna go, I'm sewing this side, I'm sewing this side, I'm sewing this side, I'm sewing this side until I get that right underneath the presser foot correctly. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just make my 1/4 inch seam allowance. There's really no reason to back stitch. We're just gonna cut that off here in a second anyways. But I am taking my time to go nice and slow because accurate piecing for this project is really gonna help. With these half square triangles on the bias, there is a little bit of fudge. You can actually stretch your pieces a little if you need to nest them together. And when you're all done, it's gonna open up, and look at that. How perfect and easy so far, right? Now, again, at this point, when I said most of our seams are gonna press to the dark side, how am I gonna do that? So I'm just gonna press it to a side. It's not gonna be the end of the world. And then we're gonna have to take this and we're gonna divide it down actually into some more subcuts. We're gonna make this into what would be considered a 9 block or a 9 patch kind of thing. I'm using my 10-inch square, so I'm gonna tell you what math we can use. If you're making a different size, you're gonna wanna figure the distance across your raw block like this. Then you're gonna wanna divide it into thirds, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a cut here, we're gonna make a cut here, here, here kind of thing. Now, I'm gonna go slow to show you how. I promised I would talk about the tape. If you're using 10-inch squares and you're following my steps step by step, you're gonna need a 2 1/8 inch cut. I'm very used to making 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch cuts with my ruler, so that 1/8 inch mark was really hard for my eyes to keep track of. And then one bad cut means you get to recreate that block. But remember, we have matching blocks, so I really want you to get each one of these correct. The reason I've put this tape over here is my eye is gonna come right off my center seam, right off of my 2 1/8 mark, 2 1/8 there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cut once across here. Okay, I'm gonna rotate 180 degrees. And then I also have to rotate my ruler. Okay, I'm going nice and slow. Remember, I only get one opportunity to get this correct. Again, I'm securing it and I'm slicing through there. So you can see we're starting to get that division. I don't want you to pull your blocks apart like that to check them. Okay, that's just because I'm confident in what I'm doing. And my quilt's already finished, by the way. Now, I'm gonna rotate because we have 2 more cuts to make. We have that same 2 1/8 right off that center seam allowance. Okay, again, nice and slow, nice and accurate, making sure all my adjustments are good. And I'm gonna sew through here. Sorry, I said sew, I meant to say cut. I told you I was focused. Okay, I'm rotating that ruler again, 2 1/8 right back onto the center seam of the pinwheel. Everything looks great. And I'm making my final cut here, which is gonna give me, technically, 9 new units to play with. Isn't that cool? Now from here you can go a million different directions. From the quilt behind me, all you have to do is take, these are called your bar blocks, they don't have any triangles in them, and they're rotated 180 degrees. Okay, and the easiest way to make sure that you're getting that right is if you look here, your green will touch your white or your color will touch your print, if we're talking about other color fabrics, right? From this point on, we're just gonna go through here and join the seams, and I've already started that to speed up the video a little bit, and here we go. So, you can see that these seams have been joined, these seams have been joined. I'm gonna still show you how to do these here. So I wanna make sure, and I literally did, I kept coming back to my block to make sure I had everything in the appropriate orientation, and then I'm just gonna take and pinch that and fold it. And then I found that I really enjoyed starting from where that little triangle seam allowance was. It seemed to give me very, very accurate finish. Again, no need to backstitch. We're gonna catch that here in a second. But there is a need for good 1/4 inch. And the key to any kind of quilting like this is make sure that your seam allowance is the same from the very first seam to the very last seam. Don't switch machines halfway through. It'll just be problematic for you. That's the key to this consistency here. We're gonna put that one on. I fold it over. I look for that same seam I like. In order to get that correct though, I'm gonna have to flip it upside down. Not much weight to this piecing, so that won't be a problem. And we're gonna stitch through here. Now, one of the things I did, again, talking about that pressing to the dark sides and whatnot, when my block comes back together, I double check to make sure. The first block, you can see, I just basically pressed the seams in one direction, kind of off of my lead seam from the bar block. But then what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that these seams were in the opposite direction. They're folded like this, and that's going to help these seams nest together as well. So when I go to press this one, I want to make sure that these seams are heading this direction. Okay, I've over-explained that, but I want you to be aware of it because it really can help the piecing, and more so than it helps the piecing, it really helps in the quilting process. You don't get any of those big mountains or big like teepee shapes forming in your seams, which makes it much easier for your machine quilting. Okay, do I have it right? Does it look good? I think so. So now we're going to nest those seams together to finish this whole block out. Okay, and I'm going to come in from the top. We're still have a little bit of bias if we need any stretch at all. And I found that by doing this very accurately, I had no trimming or squaring of the blocks required when I was done. And if you've been watching my work for years, you know I'm really an applique artist, and I really fear the piecework. But this has been such a fun project for me because I feel so confident and loved the way that it looked like I really knew what I was doing, when all I really did was just take my time and enjoy the process. Okay, so that's joined. Now we're going to join this last one and our blocks will be done. And if you bounce into our description below, I have a free printable, and in that free printable are all of these steps we've walked you through. And then there's also a fun little chart at the bottom that talks to you about how we've laid out our actual squares. And I'm going to show you that here as soon as I finish this seam. Okay, perfect. Oh, I love it. Now, if you want, you would come on over here and you would hit it with the iron. Again, I'm just going to go one direction at this point, if I can. There you go, kind of pressing from the center out, I guess is what I really should have said. That's what I did there. And then you can see how beautiful these blocks will line back up, right? And then check this out, follow me over to the quilt, because what really starts to happen is we get all kinds of fun things. Now, you get your small pinwheel, which we just created. You get a bigger pinwheel, right? And then you get this kind of fun checkerboard thing going on. So there's all kinds of different dimension. Now, let me show you this printable real quick. I want you to understand how to use our graph. So when you look at this printable, these letters refer to colors. Remember I said you're going to make two identical blocks. So these two A blocks were the same exact blocks, and they're located down in the bottom corner. But I have a 4x6 layout, so if I always did the same two, it would be very, I don't even know a word for that. That's how very it would be, right? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make it more creative, and I wanted to move the colors around. So in the quilt, I basically did two of the same blocks on the bottom corner, then I added in a new color, and I put the other block from the new color up in the corner. So down here, well, I can actually do the opposite from up here. Watch this. Let's call this A, B, B, C, C, right? And then I can start to lay it in so you only have the same ones touching here and in the very bottom corner. And that way it was a really fun way to kind of play within my colors that came basically just as they were organized from Robert Kaufman in their pack. Last thing here, and I really was jazzed about the quilting. This was one of the first all over, fairly intricately pieced quilts that I had machine quilted myself. And in looking at it, I wasn't quite sure what to do. So what I really did is I wanted to kind of have a wind swirl effect. It is a pinwheel quilt, right? So I actually laid some circles, salad bowls, some circles down on the quilt and kind of echo quilted around them. I'm hoping you can see that at home. And then I created my wind swirl motifs coming off of those bases. Now, that did two great things for me. It quilted a lot of the section of the quilt quickly and made me not so concerned about the design. And then it also gave me the opportunity to blend in those two bases, those two circles together, which gave me nice direction without the concern. Now, I have to confess, I was a bit worried that my quilting wouldn't turn out the way I wanted to, so I did it in all white thread, and that is actually another good trick. If you're not quite sure about your machine quilting, you can always match your threads. You'll still get the wonderful loft and texture, but if you have any mistakes in there, it will be much harder to see. See, you can't see the mistakes. So I actually got so motivated about it, I want to start working on some new quilting styles just like that for you all. But right now, I gotta know, did you love the pinwheel quilt or what? I bet you have a million ideas running through your head, so you better get back into your studio, and I'll get back into mine and keep creating great stuff. We'll catch you next time, right here at Man Sewing.